Hi, you're listening to Collectively Speaking by the Birthday Collective, a bottom-up initiative to develop ideas about Singapore's future. Welcome to this space, where Birthday Book alumni have conversations about the things that matter to them, to us, and to Singapore. We hope that you will be a part of the many conversations we will have, or perhaps to even start your own. And now, onward with the episode.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome to this discussion on leadership in a time of COVID. What you're going to be either listening to or viewing is really what I like to call a 2x2 session or a 2x2 discussion. It's 2x2 because, first of all, it features two organizations. This is a collaboration between a group called the Birthday Collective, which publishes something we call the Birthday Book each year around August, and also a Birthday Book Junior later in the year. These are collections of essays that feature different aspects of Singapore, and each year they're on a different theme. Each year they feature a different number of writers that equals the number of Singapore's age. So, for instance, in 2016, we started with 51 writers. What we also have today is an organization called the Halogen Foundation, which is a youth body that looks at how we can develop leadership capabilities amongst young people in Singapore. And a lot of this is premised on the idea that everybody has the potential in them to be a great leader. What we've got, therefore, is both these organizations coming together to talk about this theme of leadership and COVID. You also have two formats, hence the idea of 2x2. You can tune into this as part of Collectively Speaking, which is a podcast series that the Birthday Collective has pioneered. It can also be viewed as a video that we hope to be able to disseminate on both the Birthday Collective as well as the Halogen Foundation website. But ultimately, what's going to be really interesting is that we've got three speakers today, all of whom are from both the Birthday Collective and the Halogen Foundation. Each of them has a connection in some way with both groups. We've got Ivy with us today. She's the current CEO of the Halogen Foundation, and she will be writing an essay for the 2021 birthday book, the theme of which is Are We There Yet? So in the spirit of that, Ivy's essay is not quite there yet because it's only due later in 2021. It's a work in progress, and we're all looking forward to seeing what insights and wisdom she has to share with us. We've also got Martin Tan here with us. Martin was the executive director of the Halogen Foundation, having co-founded it. He was then ED for about 10 years, and he wrote for the 2020 birthday book, the theme of which was Seeing Clearly. And he wrote us a piece on learning from history. He's currently CEO of the Majority Trust, which is a philanthropic organization that looks at how we can improve the capacity of the social sector here in Singapore. And finally, we've got Natalia Tuhill. Natalia is the CEO of Kidet, which is an app that helps parents to help their children to be as vibrant and happy and learning-driven individuals as possible. Natalia wrote for the 2016 birthday book, which had the theme, What is Singapore's Next Big Thing? And her essay was all about things that are made in Singapore and why that's important. Natalia was a very key volunteer in many of Halogen's early efforts in the period 2006 to 2008. And we're looking forward to hearing from all of them today. And what we're going to do today is kind of have them share their thoughts with us on different aspects of leadership and COVID, and really think about how exactly our thinking about leadership has evolved in a time where we've had to deal with more digital technology and deal with the fact that organizations have had to structure themselves as well as design their activities in very, very different ways. And what I wanted to start with was a question from each of them, right, or rather pose a question to each of them on how exactly COVID has affected the work that they do as well as the volunteering that they've done. And maybe ask them to each tell us a short story, right, about how exactly those changes have played out. I wonder if we can start with Ivy for this question.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Well, I think this year we've spent quite a number of times or sessions talking about COVID. This has been the entire thing that's been hitting us this year. Well, I'll tell a little bit about how we adapted to it at the start. It was pretty interesting because we've been following the news as a local charity that does a lot of interfacing work with young people. That was pretty critical, that we monitor the situation. We did our trials really early before circuit breaker started. So we experimented with doing like a home-based or work kind of day for the entire team, something that we've never tried before. And what was really interesting is that when circuit breaker hit, it almost noticed how the autonomy and that journeying together became quite decentralized, where different individual members started to pick up ways in which they could interact with the staff more. We had all sorts of fun experiments. We had a virtual pantry so people could hang out there and eat lunches or breaks with people. We had lunchtime Kahoot sessions. We even had a staff who stepped up to run her weekly fitness sessions for the entire circuit breaker duration. It was just really nice seeing how people also filled in the gaps to support the organization in transiting through a very different norm and lifestyle.
Right. And it sounds like a lot of the leadership role there was about bringing people together, forming the social relationships that otherwise would have easily got eroded, right, in a time of online interaction.
Yeah, in fact, I think what we focused on, at least with the management team, we focused a lot on the structural things, knowing that we had to readapt all our programs, start to run them online, think of new ways to engage online because the interaction is so different. But at the same time, it was really heartening to see individuals kind of initiate their own kind of activities. I knew that there was a group that did mystery lunches. So they did kind of like a black box. They chose or picked each other's names and they sent a mystery lunch over the day and they try to guess who it was. Trying to have fun, even though it's different times and adjustments for everyone.
Yeah. And finding new ways to connect, I suppose.
Yes, and that was very heartening to see.
That's very cool. Mark, what was your experience like?
Well, for us at Majority Trust, because as a philanthropy organization, one of the key things that we wanted to focus on is how does research and how does data tell us where philanthropic dollars should go into. So when COVID started, the conversation started in January. It didn't hit Singapore until February, March, right? We started getting a bit concerned and we commissioned, at least internally, a report of saying that, hey, let's look back at our experience in SARS. So we did a very short research piece about what are the timelines. Should it happen in Singapore? What are we looking at? We sort of modeled it after SARS and said, oh, okay, actually there needs to be a lot more groundwork, more than just the healthcare side of things. Government can do certain things, but the community must respond. Round about the same time, we also started seeing a lot more happening on the ground. Right? So in February, you start listening to worrying signs like, when nurses go on board the buses, people sort of go one side. There was a bit more discrimination when it comes to our Chinese residents here. So that was all in February. And we started to get a bit more concerned because we have learned from SARS that we will recover from pandemics. But the social fracture was what we were worried about. Yeah. That one was a bit harder to heal. So at the same time, we also started seeing a lot more ground-up activities. We see young people wanting to put care packs together. We see them wanting to, go into dormitories. And we say, hey, what if, as Majority Trust, we talk to our donors and say, everybody, all hands on deck when it comes to things like that. Should it really explode, we really need to all chip in. So we went to 10 donors. We managed to raise about $500,000, about 550,000 from 10 donors. And we made it available as what we call the SG Strong Fund. The whole idea is to build Singapore strong. That's really the whole idea. So those who can give. Those who cannot put up ideas. We ended up supporting 160 over projects, ground-up initiatives. These are non-registered charities. These are young people or just adults coming together and say, hey, you know what? I want to sew mask. I want to recycle soap. I want to give care packs and pack care packs. There were people that we actually never knew, and which is what really delighted us. In this really difficult time, we saw how Singapore responded. More than just the government, more than just the corporates, but these are ordinary Singaporeans that actually responded. One of our grantees was, is a friend of mine, and I was just talking to him, and he said that, you know what, when I went back home, my neighbor looked at me and said, oh, you are the one that did the care packs, because media started covering, right? I said, yeah. Oh, I never knew what you do. So you do things like that, right? And that for me really sums up what it means during this period of time, where ordinary faces, ordinary people saying that, you know what, I have my part to play. Yeah. And for us at Majority Trust, that's what brings things back together.
Right.
We saw a need, we look back at history, we look back at research and say, you know what are the key milestones we were looking at? What are the areas we can put philanthropic dollar towards to raise the funds, convince the donors who are willing to come together, and then we put the money to work. So it is a difficult time, but it's probably also a really busy time for our team. I tell the staff, I said that, you know what? If we are not busy during this time, then something is wrong with our business model. Right? This is the right time for us as an organization to be busy. From February all the way until June, we never had a weekend off. It was like, let's go and go and go and go. And the reason for that is because SG Strong was designed as an emergency response fund. So our average application to disbursement, so that goes through the whole due diligence and stuff, right? The whole life cycle is 10 days. So from applying to the money reaching the guys to be able to activate on the ground is basically 10 days. And from a grant making point of view, that's probably the fastest fund you can get at this point of time, or that point of time, which is what is needed. But it required a whole system change. It requires us to rethink how our grant making is done, but largely because you need the money on the ground very quickly. So people responded, and I think it was a good thing. But at the same time, it was difficult. It was hard, but I guess that's what it's all about.
So Ivy talks about relationships and social capital. Martin, you've talked about data and the importance of harnessing social energy that's out there. Nat, tell us a bit about what things have been like at Cadet and leading your team.
I think for our team, because we work mainly with preschool teachers, and we're a tech business, it's been a very busy time. Prior, I think, to COVID, everyone sort of had the discussion about technology in the classroom, about the use of technology and how it can enhance our teaching capabilities. But what COVID actually did, it brought the narrative forward, I think, 3 years, which is a good and bad thing. I guess it's good when you're ready for it. It's not necessarily the best sometimes when you are suddenly rushed into a narrative that you had not planned for. So COVID and the whole circuit breaker was just a series of adjustments for my team. It was very trying, I think, trying to communicate properly to the team and to the teachers when we are so used to face-to-face communication, especially with the teachers. So even something as basic as doing a Zoom call for a meeting was a challenge initially. Everyone had to understand the protocols that came with it. So I think our entire experience was just really learning to adapt. It was one of the values that, as a team, we stuck to. And it taught us a lot about communication within our team prior to COVID, and how I think as a business, we needed to focus a bit more on that.
And adapting is hard work, right? How do you keep up the energy of the team in that whole process as a leader, right? That's one of your roles.
Exactly. I think we had to just figure it out. Like, what Ivy was talking about, we would come up with these ways of meeting up with each other. FaceTime is a godsend. Like, we would WhatsApp each other all the time, check in. We gave each other buddies, that you had to check in on, for example, just in case, for whatever reason, I couldn't. And of course, I think as a leader, just to be completely honest, that this was something we were all dealing with for the first time. So I did not have the answers. For example, if my team came to me with a problem, I was like, I'm dealing with this myself too, and we'll figure it out together. It wasn't so much about this is how we are going to do it. I know the answer to everything, but really taking their responses, understanding where everybody stood in their capabilities, and just really working with that. So it was a huge adjustment in so many ways, but a blessing in disguise as well for the business. Like, we've spent some quiet time really sort of reflecting, because I think it happened for a lot of people. You're just so caught up with operations sometimes that when you were forced to slow down and forced to rethink, it gave you perspective of where the business is actually going.
So, folks, a lot of you have talked about the demands of COVID, right? And how those have been intensified in terms of the pressures that we've all faced as leaders. Who have you looked up to during the COVID crisis? Who have you been learning from, and who do you take inspiration from? Maybe Nat, we can start with you for this one.
Yeah, sure. I think it was pretty early on, the travel industry sort of died down. And one of the first things that I saw as I was reading up on what was happening around the world was this letter by Brian Chesky to his staff. And in that letter, it was good and bad news. He basically sort of detailed where the company was going, that he didn't have all the answers, and that, they were going to figure this out together.
This is Brian Chesky from
Airbnb, yeah. And I just felt, because I mean, as a leader, you feel that responsibility to your staff, that I should have the answers to everything. If anyone comes to me with a problem, I need to fix it. And reading that letter sort of gave me perspective that, you know what, this is unprecedented times. And if I don't have the answer, I can tell my staff that I don't. And there's a process around that, and it's just all about communication. So I kind of followed him actually. Like everything he wrote and everything he said, I was living off every word, and I took huge inspiration from that. And from the way I think he managed his staff in the process. And I tried to apply a lot of that to our staff as well. I mean, I sent all of them the letter. I think we would share these pieces of information. You know, I would show them that. We would have very open and honest discussions about it. And I think myself as a leader sort of changed in the COVID process as well, because I realized, you know what, that, as I've repeated so many times, like you really just don't have the answer. Right. And it's really okay. And that your staff don't necessarily put that expectation on you. It's you as a leader that you put on yourself. And that was a huge learning curve for me. Even after running the business, I think at that point for about 3 years, it was only then that I took a step back and went, you know what, like my staff, they're capable people. Yeah. I need to give them, certain responsibilities. I don't have to take everything in. And that really shifted the culture of our company as well. Yeah.
There's an old misconception, right? That leaders must be heroes or heroines, the sole figure that achieves all the answers. Yeah. And what you're saying is that's not true.
It's not true.
We need leaders to understand that they're leaders of teams and leaders of communities.
And that there's strength in mobilizing the team that's around you. Yeah. And you're really only as strong as the energy that you put around you. Right. And having them in their influence, they also then sort of took responsibility and stepped up. Because I admitted to them that, you know what, I don't have the answer. Yeah, it was a great process for our team.
Okay, so Brian Chesky from Airbnb.
Yes, great guy.
Ivy, who's yours?
I think that the experience for me has been rather decentralized again. I struggled with this question initially because I don't have a specific name. I had a list of names. And I think in that period where, exactly as Natalia said, like we don't know, but yet we are the people that our teams look up to for some sort of answers. And I think in that process, for me, it was just a daily reminder to just keep absorbing information. So the leaders were everywhere, around the community, fellow sector leaders, people who were trying out new initiatives, really just try and consume everything and digest it and then sort of sieve out what's relevant for the organization. And I think, you know, in retrospect, it was a great test of the trust and the community that we had built, the culture we had built within the organization, because we were able to keep them posted, but tell them that we don't have the answers. And based on what we found out, we're doing A, B, and C, and we'll need your help to kind of figure out D and E along the way.
I think actually one of the things that really struck me was that leadership isn't very much individual. It became like a movement during the COVID time. Like it was groups of people that stepped up, and it was groups of people that moved other people. And that was something, at least for me, was very new to observe and to watch, and incredible at the same time.
Right.
Yeah. And it's really exciting when people step up, and also like our team members would look out for other information and they would send it across to us. Like, do you think that's relevant? Do you think we could follow this? And that shared ownership, as you're sharing that typically we kind of take it upon ourselves to have all the answers. Yeah. I thought it was really liberating to experience the fact that, you know, I have a community that I can fall back upon. And it also changed the way that I could position or ask questions to my team and said, like, I don't know about this. What do you guys think? And we kind of take the ownership of the decisions together. Yeah. Of course, there was also a larger community that we knew that we could reach out to. So learning to ask questions and step out and not be too caught up with, you know, I need to have all the answers in order to be a competent leader was liberating.
And this sounds like leadership that is not top down, right? It's leadership that galvanizes the energy of a community.
And leaning into that, because typically when you hold a formal position or you hold that stewardship, you do unfortunately to take a little bit more stress to say, like, you know, perhaps I need to own that as the chief steward. But I think learning to lean into that was actually great.
Like it's evolving. The leadership relationship is evolving.
Yeah, it's like a next level. Next level.
Yeah. Mark, you want to chime in on this?
Just thinking about the comment that was made that it's a movement, because that has been our experience, right? Time Magazine just released, again, this is a podcast, so people may be hearing this in 2021, but the Persons of the Year for 2020 is actually Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But if I think back of 2020, beyond the US, actually the Persons of the Year is the ordinary folk. Yeah. Right? The people who responded.
Resilience
the resilience of the people. People who actually rolled up their sleeve and say, you know what, I can do my part.
Yes.
Whether is it in individualistic cultures or community-based cultures, everybody feel that I got to play a part in it. And that may mean I need to wear my mask.
Yeah.
I don't hug my grandparents. Everybody have a part to play in this pandemic. But it's also interesting because one of the comments that you made is that nobody actually know what they're doing unless when they do it together. Because it's one of those classic incidents where everybody is feeling a different part of the elephant.
Yeah.
And only when we come together and collaborate together do we know that, oh, okay, we are dealing with an elephant, right? Of course, you have groups of people that say it's actually a cat, but it's actually an elephant, right? It's clear enough. But anyway, that's another topic for another day.
A tail is still a tail.
Yeah, a tail is still a tail, right? But that's so to me, and going back really to your question, are there leaders that you look up to? I think the ability for people to come together, the collective, to me is the hero in this case, right? Yeah. I would have loved for Time Magazine to put people and say, the way we responded, or even collectively the healthcare workers, for example.
Yeah.
But if you really push and say that, you know what, we do want a name, what would that be? If I look politically and governments around the world, I really do think what Angela Merkel is doing for not just Germany, but Europe as a whole in terms of her leadership, and what Jacinda Ardern is doing in New Zealand, have, I think, showcase the kind of leadership that is really needed to move masses. And if I summarize the two of them in the way that they have led with a lot of empathy, but a lot of very decisive, difficult decision making. And for a pandemic like this, you need both. You need to be both the healer in chief. At the same time, you need to be the one that really say, you know what, I need to make difficult decisions, because whatever decisions they make, lives will be lost, right? It's just they know for a fact that if I don't make this decision now, more lives will be lost. Whether do you shut down the economy, whether do you close by cities, whether do you stop people. So there is a lot at stake. And if I look globally in terms of specific names, I think these two female leaders actually really shown the way of how you lead with tremendous empathy at a time that we need that a lot.
That's great. So we're really moving away from the pure commander-in-chief, although you still need that, but you want the healer-in-chief, you want the energy steward-in-chief, right, and the community builder-in-chief. And those are very different models of leadership in a lot of ways. Cool. Let me just follow up with one quick other question, right, at this stage. A lot of what you all described is about vulnerability as well, right? Empathy cannot happen if we're not willing to be vulnerable within ourselves. And all of you actually talked about not knowing all the answers. Let me push that further and ask you, did anything fail for you during COVID? Was there anything that, was there a situation where you didn't just not know the answer, but you actually saw something crumble and disintegrate? And how did you bounce back from that?
For me, it's is it lemon skin? No, the series an unfortunate event.
Yeah.
Lemon snicket.
In this time, this whole year of 2020, I don't think it was a one big failure, but rather a series of trial and errors that defined for me 2020, right? When we started SG Strong, for example, we wanted it to be 5 days, but really we could not. We wanted to go to our donors, and sometimes we couldn't get to the people we wanted to get to, but new people came up. We wanted 10 donors. We only have 5 to start off with, and we say, you know what, let's just keep going with it. I don't think it was a series. I don't think it was a failure, but really the trial and errors, because nobody knew what we were doing, right? We were just trying to respond as quickly as we can.
And everything kept changing.
Right? The policies start changing. You plan something, and then all of a sudden,
the global situation was evolving all the time. Right?
So if there's anything about failure that we have learned, is that, you know what, everybody is failing at the same time. So who cares? Just really rethink your hypothesis, rethink your premise, and let's just try it differently.
I think that was a great thing, because prior to this, no one really wanted to talk about it. No one talked about failures. It was always such a negative. But then people started looking at it as a problem-solving situation. Like every time something bad happens, I know I could reach out to others because everyone was going through the same thing. And it really supported that process. And I think a lot of founders sort of reached out to each other as well and created like a network so that everyone could collaborate. People that you otherwise wouldn't have collaborated with because they were competitors. Like people were reaching out, and everyone was troubleshooting together.
Yeah. And WhatsApp groups were exploding everywhere, right?
WhatsApp
people exchanged
did really
those
well.
ideas. Ivy, did you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because we talk about failure with a certain sense of a bow expectation, right? And in many sense of the situation here this year with COVID, it kind of just removed the bar because everyone had, for lack of a better word, an excuse to say, that's not what we planned. This is really out of our realm of control. And I think when that hit, if you talk about expect failure as not meeting what you set out the year to be, then I think everyone's probably in many ways been affected.
The bar has shifted.
But at the same time, I guess the bars were set for a certain outcome, objective and goal, and it really got us to just re-question, to still get there, how can we maneuver what we have with the kind of resources or the restrictions? How can we still attain what we want to achieve, maybe in a different form? And I think that adaptation has been something that stood out a lot. I kind of witnessed that again and again within the organization. Like, if you were to ask a question, how did we achieve some of our goals? I would say whatever that we wrote in our blueprints at the start of the year, everything was thrown out the window.
Right.
But it was also very interesting to see how time and time again with creativity or trying to push the boundary, the teams were able to come up with alternative ways that delivered outcomes in a very different setting.
It's interesting what you said about blueprints, because I suspect we live in a world where all the old blueprints are gone and we don't quite know what new blueprints are going to be there,
And
if
we
any.
really like plans. We have a tendency to want to
Yes,
know.
people
what
want
else
templates,
is
they
in
want structures, but you don't always get the comfort of those.
And it's amazing if you think about it, right? Like when you have permission to fail. So COVID basically gave people permission to fail, right?
Yeah.
When you have permission to fail, you see people respond with more innovative thinking, with more courage, and with more gumption to say that, hey, it's okay, let me just move on. You think about this pre-COVID, where every failure is met with consequence, and
Why? Be accountable. And that
so
sort of thing.
all of a sudden you realize, wow, actually, if we can give people and our team members a permission to actually fail, the reward that you reap is actually sizable.
Yes.
Right? So if COVID is anything to show, is that people do respond. People don't want to fail because they are wanting to fail. They fail because they're trying something. And as long as we give them permission to actually fail, they will learn from it and they become better.
And then everything's more transparent. Communication is better because you realize that I don't have to hide the fact that I've actually failed something. You don't have to feel any shame. Everyone is going through it. So we just need to share our experiences and lift everyone up from that.
I mean, if I'm taking away one thing from this last chunk of our discussion, it's really that failure is the flip side of learning, right? And learning can only happen through experiments and iteration. And we only experiment and iterate when we allow ourselves that space, right, to try things out and maybe get them wrong, but that's okay because we will still actually learn from that whole process. So leaders need to not just be healers in chief or energy managers in chief, they need to be experimenters in chief as well, right, and create that space. So, folks, I've been wondering, based on everything you've said so far, if you had to describe your overall leadership philosophy or approach, right, what would that be and how has that changed given the demands of COVID in the last few months?
I think for me, taking inspiration from Brian Chesky and Airbnb, I think I've learned to communicate better. This is what COVID has taught me, that the ability to connect with people, not just face to face, that I used to be so used to before, and not relying so much on action, but really communicating on a deeper level with my staff. That was something that has changed. And I spent a lot more time with them in the last couple of months than I think we did before. Because in the past, you're just so busy chasing your KPIs, you're busy chasing your deadlines. That this time around, it was really about digging deep, understanding them outside of work. And prior to that, I always felt that, that took time away from us reaching our goals. But now I think what has changed is I've prioritized that. I've prioritized being with them. I've prioritized, like what I think we chatted a little bit about, like being that energy person for them.
Yeah.
And
energy steward.
The energy steward, exactly. And playing more of that role as compared to thinking I'm the mother hen that needs to keep, make sure all my chicks are in good, on a very motherly perspective, just being like, okay, everybody is healthy and eating and, everyone is good. But no, it's actually on a deeper level. So I've definitely learned to take a step back and change the way I communicate with my staff. And that has been such a great thing, I think, for me personally, during this time.
Nice. Ivy?
I think I would describe my leadership philosophy to be very people-centered in whatever we do. And I think COVID's really put that to the extra test.
Oh, yes.
I've always believed that there's a natural instinct for people to want to do good, contribute, make an impact. And so as we manage, I mean, we could use the word energy, or we could manage, describe it as their emotions, their well-being.
Morale, motivation.
Yeah, and when that level is filled, then they're able to pour out things from within there. And a large part of the focus during the transition was to ensure that people were okay. And one thing I've learned that surprised me, because many people were saying, like, you're doing it online, and online you don't get the face-to-face connection.
But you can.
Yeah, I actually think that you can. Probably we had to invest a little bit in building relationships prior to that. But sometimes I think we give ourselves excuses like, okay, with the digital, it's not so easy. It's convenient. But at the same time, I think true authentic conversations that go deep, talking about what drives them, what they're really struggling with, being a listening ear, all these are not impeded by, technology or not. And I think when I kind of wrapped my head around that paradigm too, it kind of unlocked the ability to just spend time, and sometimes not to be hustling so much about, okay, let's come up with a ready response, let's come up with the next plan immediately within this meeting, but holding some space to just really talk about what's been going on, let them relieve some of the stresses. It's been a really stressful period for many people. Some of our team members have young parents. I really think they are some of the unsung heroes in this whole period of time, because they had to manage their children at home, family, as well as doing a good job at work, and giving them just time to share and journeying with them where they're at. Once you restore their energy and their well-being, you see them starting to go back into the routines of thriving, and they bring good work to the organization.
Ivy, I can probe this a bit further, right? What you describe works if a team is already in place and they know each other well and, in a sense, already have that sense of relationship to invest in each other, right? How would you onboard someone new to a team in a time like COVID?
Of course,
did you?
Yeah, we did. We had a couple of new people join us, as well as the interns.
Right.
It's definitely taken a very different spin, because they had to, most of them engaged with us predominantly online for the first 2-3 weeks. So they joined nearer to the end of circuit breaker. But I think for one, the mindsets that we put ourselves into are actually very dangerous or very useful. So if we enter with the mindset that, with online, we're not able to make deep relationships and deep conversations, I think that's half the battle lost. So I think it starts with ourselves being able to first correct the lenses that we carry.
Right.
With the teams that came on board, mostly on the online platform, we gave them a lot more extra touch points. So we sent a lot of people send them to a lot of different calls so that they could interact with more people and catch a glimpse of that. Of course, it helped when they eventually could come on site to office, but I wouldn't shift the entire responsibility to, it's the mode, and therefore we couldn't build any meaningful conversations online.
Right. So we're not powerless in an online environment.
We're not. We could do the best with what we have.
Right.
It comes back to culture, right? I think if you have managed to build a culture that is sticky, then that stickiness should have the ability to transcend technology, transcend generations, transcend geography. And if you invest in strong culture, then it should take you through to different things. And I think to your point about leadership philosophy, there are many ways we can go with this, or at least I can go with it. But if I can choose one, authenticity, it's probably, for me at this time, if you were a leader that is doing it just because it's a job, you care for people just because you think it's the right thing to do. You run an organization just because that's the job, and you're not extremely passionate about it, but because this is the time that it will show. Does that make sense? If there is anything that people can cut through, it is during the time of crisis where people realize whether do you walk the talk, whether you put money where their mouth is, whether do you really care. You say that sometimes we learn leadership practices, which is important because the more we practice, the better we become. But if it becomes a series of formula, you're found out very quickly in a crisis, because if you're not authentic about what you believe in, if you're not authentic in terms of your care for your people, then it's going to be very hard as a leader during this time. Both in terms of your relationship with your team, but as well as the productivity of the team during a time where there's so much demand on them, right? And I think people respond to authentic leaders where they realize, you know what, I will kill myself on the battlefield for this general kind of concept because we're in this together. There is that belief that, you know what,
They've got your back.
They've got your back up. Yeah. I think that is tremendously important, especially when it comes to a time of crisis.
Did you want to add anything to that, Nat?
No, I completely agree. I think, like making sure that you actually truly connect with your staff is something that a lot of leaders think they're doing, like what you said, like, it's my responsibility to be like, hey, you okay? And that's it. But it's more than that. It's really on connecting with them as a person outside of work. And that will really solidify your team. So
ultimately coming from the bottom of your heart, because
people
can smell you and smell your sincerity from a mile away.
Of course, and I think even on the leader, like if it's not sincere, then it's on you as well because it's not natural, and then or then it becomes an even bigger stress for yourself because you feel like I just have to do this so that this can happen when it shouldn't be the case.
I'm mindful that there will be listeners or people who watch that I'm not a caring type. I'm leading a team, but I'm not. So sometimes I'm very mindful that we tend to think about empathy as a rites of passage, but we all display that differently. We all show care differently.
Exactly.
And that's the reason why I think I centered on the word authenticity, because it is not the mode of care. It's not the personality of care, right? It's the genuine care that you show to people in your own way. There are leaders that we know that have no emotions, but you could tell, right?
Yeah,
you can't fake it, especially during this time. So I wouldn't worry too much if you're not the expressive type. I will worry whether, if you genuinely don't care about people, then, okay, you might want to rethink that. Yes. But I wouldn't be too concerned.
Leadership at all, right?
Yeah. Then I wouldn't be genuinely too concerned about the house and the role models of, certain types of leaders. But just authenticity will come true.
A lot of this leads, I think, to one very important area, which is how we manage our own energy as leaders. I mean, Ivy, you talked about how you need to fill people up, right? And once they're filled up, they can come back, they bounce back. There's a huge amount of energy that's left. Martin and Nat, you've each both, talked about the importance of authenticity and communication, both of which take a huge amount of energy, actually, right? From ourselves, not just from the team. And what I'm curious about is how each of you as leaders take care of yourself. How do you keep your own cups filled such that you can fill the cup of others and of the communities that you're leading? It's a hard question, but I think it's an important one, because if we can't take care of ourselves, then we can't take care of the systems that we're in.
I'm mindful that what I'm about to share may not be the best example.
I was about to say McDonald's kept me sane, and then they shut down, and my mental health went to crap. And then they shut down bubble tea, which was an even bigger step to the heart.
Right.
But
well, we all have coping mechanisms, right?
It's all about your own.
So what was it about McDonald's and bubble tea?
Oh, I just love it.
Comfort food.
It's comfort food. Okay. Yeah, my team knows this. They would send me McDonald's. Like every time we went through a stressful period, I would get a package. Yeah. That's bubble tea or McDonald's. Like it was just a thing that my team knew. I mean, self-care is so personal. Yeah, like some people meditate. I fall asleep. Like I can't do that. But I think it's really about just finding your routine and finding something to take yourself out of work, which I think during COVID was hard. Like because you're working, living, everything in the same space. So that was really, I think, learning to just take a step back and telling yourself, you know what, just because my computer is on, I don't have to actually finish the work now. Like we can set boundaries, it's okay. And telling that to my team as well, like saying, you know what, today is off. Like don't look at your computer, don't pick up the phone, like just go and decompress and do something. But when it comes to self-care, it's really just finding something that you can switch off, finding something that just enriches you or soothes you. It doesn't have to be a specific type. It doesn't have to be yoga.
It's quite individual, right?
So individual. Yeah.
I mean, I would just take the flip side of it as well, because sometimes in difficult situations like this, where there's a lot of demand, it's actually perfectly okay. Which is why I said that I'm a bit mindful what I'm about to say may not be the best example. It's actually perfectly okay to run a really, really long race and really tough race.
Sure.
And just give everything of yourself because that's what is needed at that point.
Yep.
Not to say that you give up on taking care of yourself, but there are certain seasons in our lives where taking care of yourself is really not the priority of that time.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right? Now, does that mean that it's not important to take care of yourself? You still need to find pockets of it.
Yeah.
So take Majority Trust example, when the team worked every single weekend, I told the team, I said, guys, I really am very sorry. I know we need to take care. I know we need to find time and it's important. But there comes a point in time where we just have to do what we need to do for the sake of what's going around. And COVID crisis is one of them. But it's also up to them for us as leaders to make sure that when there is some lull time, to ensure that everybody have that space and the buffer, right? To be able to say, you know what, let's take a break now so that we can ride the next wave of the hard work. And the reason why I come back to this point is because sometimes my worry is that we do take self-care as like the most important thing. But when the time is needed for us to go through, we become maybe sometimes less resilient of saying that, you know what, we need to actually push through and so on. It doesn't mean that I don't value that. I value that tremendously. But there are just moments in time where we just need to push through and give whatever we have. Yeah. Because times like this don't come very often. Yeah. And I think when it's called upon, I think it's important.
Absolutely. I mean, I was thinking about what you said, Nat, about meditation and yoga. I mean, I'm one of those, right? I need a lot of quiet time. But I do the quiet time by myself because it helps me be better in a community. Not just because it is valuable in and of itself, although it is. Yeah, and I'm just curious how far we can kind of develop that idea. What do you do in the pockets of time that Martin mentioned so that we recharge and make sure that we can keep giving all that is needed of us in mad and manic times like the ones we live in? Ivy, did you want to add anything on this?
Yeah, I've learned that self-care is also first about the self-awareness. I think we alluded to that in some of the themes. So first, it's very personalized. So you need to know, you need to go, if you don't know what energizes you, you should really experiment and try different things. There's a certain degree of discipline and intentionality behind that. It's not just about setting aside time. Some people can go off for 3 days and then come back and say, I'm still really drained. The moment I hit my emails, I'm drained. And I trust me, it's not the emails. It's probably that you didn't decompress or fill up the tank the way you should. And that requires a degree of self-awareness. What makes me tick? How can I recharge? That discipline to set aside that time. But I do feel, it's a tight balance like what Martin shared. In times where we have to pull through, we probably have to do that. But at the same time, I would urge leaders to have that sensitivity to their own internal meter, that thermometer of sorts, because I believe, at least for me, I know that if I'm not in a good place, nothing good comes out of me, no matter how hard I tank. And so it's important to be fit, be healthy, be well, so that I can serve those people that I care about and I love, and I'm here to steward.
So I'm going to push you, Martin and Ivy, because you've both talked about why this is important, whether in pockets or in large tracts of time, right, to recover and in a sense take care of ourselves. But what do you do? Do you spend time with your family? Do you have versions of burgers and ice cream and French fries that Natalia does? Do you do yoga and meditation? Do you just curl up into a ball and sleep? What do you do concretely?
I do nothing.
That's fine.
That in itself is something.
I curl up into a ball.
Yeah.
Okay.
I sleep for long stretches. I'm really glad that most of my recharging is pretty fuss-free. So I'll go for a run or I'll sleep non-stop until I feel like waking up.
Those are quite different things, run and sleep.
But
That's good. It works for you.
Nature helps. And then recently I've tried to experiment with digital detoxes where I just put my phone aside for a day. I think really it's just trying new things. So I have a few practices that work, which includes just sleep and going out for runs. But trying some new things as well, just to have fun.
What's your biggest experiment so far that you've been enjoying?
I have not fully experimented it. I bought a guitar and my mom's like, what? You bought a guitar?
Okay.
So I have zero musical talents, but I'm determined to just go on YouTube and learn a couple of things.
Right.
And so it's really just trying something totally new that I don't know whether I can do, but yeah.
We should just put you on the spot and do it now.
I can strum it. That's it.
The deep immersion can sometimes be quite powerful, I think, on that front. Yes. Mark.
I think. Oh no, you have kids too. So I think home for me is sort of a ground zero.
A haven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Home has different kind of stresses, right? So when it's a different kind of stress, it takes you away from.
Work.
It just gives you a diversity of stresses, right? It's just a very different environment. It takes you away from work. So for me, especially during this period, home became a ground zero for me. Just after all the things that's being done, come home, kids are there, the dogs are there, my wife is there, we go for walks and so on. I think that makes a huge difference.
Yep.
The one thing I do miss, it's a individual time that I don't get this year. Because the only really individual time that I have is when I travel, right? When I travel for work, when you're on a plane on your own, when you are in a different city on your own, all of a sudden you are completely in a very different environment, then that's sort of my time to wind down and rethink and, just ask difficult things and questions and so on. But this year you can travel. So that's the one thing I don't have when it comes to self-care, an absolute alone time. Beyond that is largely with friends, with family. I find that being able to just catch up for lunches with people that's completely not work-related and talk about Liverpool, talk about football,
Which will stress you out in different ways, I
Oh,
suppose.
well, it's been good.
For some of us.
I'm not a
some
Man U
of us,
fan,
yes,
so
some of us.
sorry,
okay.
it's a different story altogether.
The whole other podcast 2 times.
Yes, indeed, we will do that.
Yeah.
So we should wrap up soon. If I asked you each, right, to think about all that we've talked about and your own thoughts on leadership in general, if you had to, leave one parting shot for our listeners and viewers, right? One parting shot that's in roughly a tweet length, an old tweet, right? Not this new 288 character stuff, but the old 144, right? What would you say to people, right? One piece of leadership advice.
There's no right or wrong. I think that's it.
Okay.
No right, no wrong. I mean, even leadership or self-care, anything. There's no right way to do it. There's no wrong way to do it. It's just really about having honest conversation with yourself and understanding what you feel needs to be done and not what people expect you to do. Like, just last thoughts on the self-care aspect. We all have ways of self-care, but for some people, maybe that's just not for them. Yeah. And that's okay. And knowing that in itself is fine. So my parting shot would be no right, no wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Everything is situational.
Everything is
contextual.
situational.
No right
Yeah.
or wrong. Very cool.
I'll go with simplify. I think with COVID, it forced us to think of different routines or new routines. And in that process, for many people, doing something radically different overnight really got us to question what's core and what's important. And I think in that process, you realize that over time, we've just acquired many fancy ways sometimes to do things more effectively, efficiently. And then, all it takes is just a pandemic to hit and we realize it's simple. It's fundamentally about doing good work, fulfillment, family, relationships. So simplify. And I think that's pretty liberating.
I like that, Ivy. I actually volunteer teach a course called Leadership in a Complex World. So maybe I'll change the title of that and make it Leadership in a Simple World. Yeah.
I really
Martin,
like that,
yeah.
simplify.
Yeah.
Can I tell a short story to talk about a tweet? I use this story a lot in my classes. There is a young king that came into power, and as part of his new rule, he went to the mountain to seek the old wise man. And as every story, there's an old wise man. And the old wise man sat with him and just wrote forwards on a stone. And for a good whole generation, the wise king used their forwards and ruled really, really well until he died. And everybody was wondering, what is their forwards? It became a folklore, what their forwards were. And they finally found out what their forwards were. Forwards were, this too shall pass. The wise man told the king that in good times, take out the stone. When you feel really, really good and how much you conquer, look at the stone. When things are really bad, pick up the stone, look at the forwards. I've always liked that because really one of the most difficult things in crises is that we think there is no light at the end of the tunnel, and we lock ourselves into an unbelievable situation in a corner where we think that there is no choice, and we make we make decisions that we really shouldn't because we are bound by limits. But in good times and in bad times, really, these 4 words will be probably my best advice to any leader, that this too shall pass.
Right.
You can have the best fame, you can be, touted as the best leader, that too will pass. No matter how difficult the crisis is, or how difficult how difficult a time the organization is going through, if you stay with it, this too will pass.
Yeah.
I've always liked that. So in 4 words, what will be my advice? This too will pass.
Cool.
Especially this year.
All right. So there's no right or wrong, partly because this too shall pass, and therefore what we need to do is simplify. I think that's a great way and a great note on which to end. Thank you, all 3 of you, for joining us today.
Thank you
for
for
being
having us.
for being part of such a wonderful discussion. Thank you to all of you who are viewing or listening in any way. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed listening to these 3 writers who've contributed to different editions of the birthday book, or will contribute in Ivy's case, and who have all had wonderful connections either as leaders or volunteer leaders with the Halogen Foundation. And I hope you'll be able to support the work of both these organizations in sometime in the future. Thanks again.
Thank you for listening to Collectively Speaking by the Birthday Collective. We aim to be a brain, heart, and hand trust for Singapore, focusing on the gifts we can offer to future generations. To find out more, visit our website at thebirthdaycollective.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Birthday Collective. If you enjoyed this episode, do subscribe and drop us a review.